I'm going to, see my jars right there? That's where we're going to be. I just got to get down there a sec. All right. So, yeah, you see my first one here already. So first of all, that's the one that you knew was missing. What emotion is that on there? Sad, right? So today we are celebrating, but we also sometimes today, a day like today makes us kind of sad because we're remembering the people that we have lost, all right? And there's all kinds of different ways that we can be sad. Can you think of some times when you're sad? What makes you sad? Nothing makes you sad? What do you think, Owen? Thank you. Not getting the last piece of meatloaf. That can make you sad. Absolutely. Right? Or maybe you get sick and you can't go to a party. Or you wanted to do something and you couldn't, right? And today we're talking about a special kind of sadness. We call it grief. Do you know what grief is? Grief is when we are sad about something or someone we have lost. So we often think about people who have died and they can't be with us anymore and we can't be with them, and that makes us sad, and we call that grief. Or sometimes it's been things like not being even able to go to school when you wanted to because of this silly pandemic, and that causes us grief. It's things that we've lost.
Like I'm getting the vaccine today.
Yeah, you're going to get the vaccine today. Lucky you. And I think everybody else here thinks that too. Grief, it does. Grief is about the things we've lost. And today, especially, we're remembering people that we've lost. Grandmas and grandpas, or a daddy, or a friend, or all sorts of different people. So, this is what I want to show you. Sometimes, especially when it first happens, it's like consumes us, and we are just sad all the time. And so if this is my grief, we're going to pretend like this is grief, and this is me, I just feel nothing but sadness, and I can't stop crying, and it just makes me really, really sad, right? And sometimes people think, well, after some time goes past, our grief gets smaller. But you know what? Our grief doesn't really get smaller, but what happens is our heart grows a little bit more, because grief can change us. Do you remember The Grinch Stole Christmas, that storybook? And how at the end he learned something and his heart grew. What did it grow? 3 sizes that day or something? 5 sizes, whatever it was. Our heart grows, we change. Grief changes us. And part of that is we learn how to live with the sadness that we have. And it maybe doesn't bother us quite so much, but it's still there. Right? It's still there. And then even as more time goes on, eventually grief becomes a smaller part of who we are, because we have grown and changed, and our hearts have gotten bigger, and we've learned, we have new people that love us, and we've learned how to love other people, but it's still there. And once in a while it bumps up and catches us, and we still have that grief. I wanted to tell you about a friend of mine who's been gone now. She died over 10 years ago, but I still miss her. And I especially miss her getting to about this time of the year, because on Thanksgiving weekend, we would always make Christmas cookies together. And so every year on Thanksgiving, it's just like, if this is my sadness about Nancy, hang on a minute. If this is my sadness about Nancy, most of the time, it's just there. And it's no big deal, right? But once in a while, especially like for me, when it's time to bake Christmas cookies and I'm remembering her, it makes me sadder than normal. Does that make sense? Does that make sense a little bit? So our grief doesn't change, but what happens is we change. And we learn how to live with grief, and we learn other things that are happening, and we learn all sorts of other love, but that grief is always there. Do you remember what you were going to say?
Yeah.
What?
Were you talking about my great grandma?
I could have been talking about, I was talking about somebody else that you never even got to meet. But she was a friend of mine. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a coin. And it says he lives on there. Because one of the things we know and remember is that it is Jesus who helps us in our grief. Because Jesus raises people, you're going to hear that in the gospel reading, raises us from the dead. And we know that death is never the end. That there's always more to life. There's more to death than that. And so life comes out of death. And so I want you to take this and you put it someplace, maybe in your pocket or at home by your bed or someplace, think about this as this is your grief, right? And we carry it with us all the time, but it can change as we grow as well, okay? And we remember that even in our grief, Jesus lives. Okay, doke? All right, thank you for coming up. I appreciate it. And I believe we're continuing.